After structuring the pneuma, the universe we inhabit, the archontic order established the illusion of material reality in order to keep the human soul in forgetfulness of the pleroma. But it also had to freeze the consciousness of the human being forever within a mental prison and give confinement the appearance of self-evidence. It is within this function that Abrisene appears, the Archon of Fixation, not the one who leads astray through fear, nor the one who seduces through desire, but the one who freezes, the one who immobilizes consciousness, who is in structures so familiar that they are no longer even perceived as the bars of the prison. Under his influence, inner habits harden, the narratives of the world take on the appearance of reality, and the soul ends up confusing repetition with truth. Abrisene does not embody chaos as brute disorder. He acts more deeply in that silent zone where mental forms consolidate, where beliefs crystallize, where psychic patterns become invisible frameworks. With him, delusion no longer merely seduces or deceives, it settles in, becomes normalized, becomes fixed, it becomes structure. What if the greatest prison were not the one imposed on us by force, but the one we eventually come to inhabit inwardly without even discerning its walls? And what if certain thoughts, certain fears, certain ways of seeing the world did not truly belong to us, but had imposed themselves within us since the beginning? Ontologically, Abrisene proceeds from the imbalance introduced by the fall out of the primordial harmony of the pleroma. He is an archontic authority issuing from the demiurge, a form born in the pneuma, where reality no longer unfolds according to divine unity, but according to fragmentation, ignorance, and repetition. But Abrisene does not represent only error or illusion in its most visible sense. His proper nature is more subtle. He embodies the moment when illusion ceases to be fluid and becomes stable, when what was only temporary distortion hardens until it takes on the form of an order. In him, ignorance no longer manifests merely as blindness, but as fixation. It becomes structure, habit, inertia. It settles into consciousness and takes on the appearance of enduring truth. Abrisene is therefore not a creator in the true sense, for nothing that belongs to the archontic order can engender spiritual life. His power is that of a consolidation of the false, a framework given to illusion, a principle that transforms the constructions of the lower world into realities that appear natural and unquestionable. In this sense, Abrisene acts first upon the human psyche. What Abrisene seeks to immobilize is the soul in its psychic dimension, its way of perceiving, believing, repeating, and internalizing the forms of the material world until it takes them for its own nature. His domination does not consist in destroying being, but in maintaining it within a closed, rigid form, incapable of remembering what lies beyond it. Abrisene thus embodies a particular modality of the archontic order. Not brute violence, not immediate seduction, but silent hardening. He is the power through which mental frameworks close in, beliefs crystallize, and the limits of the lower world end up being experienced as the very limits of reality itself. With him, the prison is no longer merely imposed from without, it becomes an inner form of consent to confinement. Thus, for the Gnostics, Abrisene may be understood as the hypostasis of fixation, not a founding power, but a power of stabilizing the false, an agent of solidifying illusion within consciousness, a principle of spiritual immobility in the service of the lower world. Within Gnostic cosmology, Abrisene's position is discrete, yet not less essential. He belongs to that web of powers through which the pneuma, our universe, is maintained not only as a space of separation, but as a stable system ordered according to the laws of illusion. His cosmological position is therefore not that of a beginning, but of a lock. That is why Abrisene may be understood as a power situated at the point where illusion ceases to be fluid and becomes framework. He acts within that intermediate zone where the forms of the lower world become stabilized, where invisible structures take on consistency, where repetition becomes law. He does not reign over the deceptive brilliance of appearances, but over their rooting. He is less connected to the emergence of the false than to its sedimentation in the deep levels of the cosmic order. Where other Archons govern through agitation, Abrisene governs through immobilization. Where others divert the soul through immediate passions, he inscribes confinement into duration. He participates in that dark framework of the lower world which gives hierarchies, cycles, conditioning, and the limits of existence their apparent solidity. Cosmologically, Abrisene thus stands among those powers that transform the disorder of separation into a carceral order. For the pneuma is not merely a fallen world, it is a world stabilized in its fall. And for such stability to be possible, there must be powers capable of fixing boundaries, consolidating frameworks, and preventing any spontaneous ascent back toward the origin. Abrisene belongs to that order. It does not obstruct the path toward the light by means of mental or physical barrier, but by making confinement so coherent, so familiar, so deeply integrated into the order of reality, that the very idea of another origin comes to seem unthinkable. Abrisene does not rule over one of the seven heavens, but belongs rather to the Archons connected to the five lower domains, alongside Yobel, Armupiel, Melchior, and Belias. Abrisene's action upon reality does not consist in creating mental illusions, nor in producing visible raptures in human existence. His work is deeper, slower, more insidious. He acts where the false appears as an ordinary way of inhabiting the world. Under his influence, illusion no longer presents itself as an obvious deception, but as embodied self-evidence. What imprisons is no longer perceived as a constraint, but as a natural form of reality. From this perspective, Abrisene does not alter the material world in itself. He acts upon the way the soul perceives it, interprets it, and becomes attached to it. His power is exercised within the psychic space where habits of thought, inner automatisms, inherited beliefs, and repeated reactions are formed. He seeks to make the soul captive to ancient representations of the world. For example, the repetition of beliefs or rites often freezes us in ignorance. Religious traditions can reassure the soul while at times keeping it trapped within inherited forms that have become empty of meaning. Science, when it claims to explain everything, may gradually impose itself as a new religion. In politics, the idea of the providential woman or man is a reassuring chimera. Finally, fear of the other and rejection of the other precisely because he is other seems to trigger the most archaic survival reflexes. This is how Abrisene acts within the psyche, by turning repetition into truth. A repeated fear becomes legitimate prudence. Repeated submission becomes a sense of duty. Repeated limitation becomes realism. An existence lived in forgetfulness of the light comes to appear as the only possible form of existence. The soul no longer feels imprisoned because it has ended up internalizing the walls of its prison. But, as always in the Gnostic perspective, this domination does not touch the pneuma itself. The pneuma remains foreign to the archontic order, even when the psyche seems entirely shaped by it. That is why Abrisene's work, however powerful it may be, is never absolute. He may freeze the soul within closed mental structures, but he cannot abolish the divine spark. He may thicken forgetfulness, but he cannot destroy the possibility of awakening. He may silence memory, but not erase its origin entirely. Therein lies the full subtlety of his action. Abrisene does not seek to annihilate the human being. He seeks to render useless, unthinkable, or inaccessible any inner movement toward the light. His true power does not consist in forbidding the return, but in making the prison inwardly acceptable. Abrisene's proper role in the fixation of mental structures consists in making durable those structures that already exist. He intervenes when the mental forms born of fear, desire, forgetfulness, or confusion cease to be mere passing movements and become stable structures of consciousness, reflexes of the psyche. For example, Abrisene is at work when he ensures that our fear of annihilation becomes inscribed into the very structure of our societies by validating within our minds the notions of preventive war or nuclear deterrence, as though the physical annihilation of the other had no relation to our own moral annihilation. Likewise, Abrisene ensures that our desire to possess everything has reified even our relationships with others. His function is to transform repeated experience into a mental framework. A thought born of fear becomes a permanent way of interpreting the world. An old wound becomes an identity. An inherited habit becomes a truth. Prolonged submission becomes a norm. Under Abrisene's action, the psyche no longer merely undergoes the influences of the lower world. It organizes them within itself, stabilizes them, reproduces them, until illusion becomes an intimate structure. This is how the strongest mental prisons are formed, not those imposed by visible coercion, but those that become so deeply integrated that they are no longer perceived as constrictions. Abrisene acts as that moment when conditioning ceases to be felt as foreign. The soul then adopts the limits imposed upon it, internalizes them, and eventually comes to defend them. It confuses its imposed form with its true being. His role is therefore profoundly tied to the normalization of illusion. For removing illusion may still be perceived as such, but an illusion that is stabilized, transmitted, repeated, justified, and internalized ends up acquiring the authority of reality. Abrisene gives precisely this authority to the false. He consolidates it until it appears necessary. What was only a construction of the fallen world then becomes a psychic self-evidence, a tacit law, a limit one no longer even thinks to cross. Abrisene thus acts as the silent guardian of archontic continuity. He sees to it that inner frameworks do not crack, that the narratives of the lower world remain credible, that the soul remains adjusted to the cosmic prison as though it were naturally destined for it. It has no need for spectacular violence. It is enough that consciousness adheres to what limits it. Thus, Abrisene's role in the fixation of mental structures is essential to archontic domination. He is the one who prevents the soul from moving inwardly, the one who transforms illusion into a durable framework, the one who turns prison into a habit of consciousness. Through him, the false does not merely exist. It stabilizes itself, repeats itself, internalizes itself, until it takes on the face of reality itself. Let us now return to the question that guided our reflection. What if the greatest prison were not the one imposed on us by force, but the one we eventually come to inhabit inwardly without even discerning its walls? Through Abrisene, the Gnostics invite us to understand that archontic domination does not rest only upon fear, desire, or forgetfulness, but also upon something deeper still, the inner fixation of illusion. For the lower world is not maintained only by the appearances it produces, but by the mental structures it impresses upon the human psyche. As long as these remain intact, confinement no longer even needs to show itself. It becomes a way of thinking, of feeding, of interpreting, of consenting. Abrisene embodies precisely this silent power. He is the one who transforms error into habit, habit into norm, norm into self-evidence. Under his influence, the soul is no longer merely deceived. It learns to live within a prison it believes it has always inhabited. The false no longer appears as a distortion of reality, but as reality itself. And perhaps that is the most subtle form of confinement, when illusion ceases to be perceived as illusion. But in the Gnostic perspective, no structure of the lower world is absolute. For even when the psyche seems entirely shaped by archontic frameworks, the pneuma remains irreducible to their grip. It subsists as a silent memory, as a possibility of awakening, as a light forgotten but not destroyed. That is why Abrisene's work, however deep it may be, can never be total. He may freeze consciousness, but not abolish the source. He may impose repetition, but not entirely erase the call of return. For as soon as an inner structure begins to crack, as soon as an imposed self-evidence ceases to be absolute, as soon as consciousness glimpses that its limits may not in fact be the limits of reality, Abrisene's work begins to unravel. And within that fissure, however slight it may be, the path may already begin to open toward remembrance, toward rapture, toward the light of which the lower world was never the true dwelling place.